We're going to start the meeting tonight for a call of order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, so we can note the roll call. Everybody is here. And we do have one executive session announcement. We had an executive session on Monday the 17th to discuss personnel. I'm asking everybody to stick around for like 10-15 minutes to just go over one more executive session tonight, right after this meeting. And we'll do it quick. We're going to move on to public comment. Do I have anybody here for public comment? I got no slips. Hearing none. Anybody online? Nobody online. All right. We're going to move on to the reporter superintendent, please.
Thank you. This evening, I'd like to start my report with a presentation on Chromebook student devices. I'd like to invite our Director of Technology, Mr. Jeff Bittler, to the microphone, and he's going to share some information that'll be presented behind us as well.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me? Okay. So through the CIT committee, we've begun the discussion of rolling out Chromebooks to our students. It's very important that we understand that we're talking about student devices, not staff devices. So the discussion thus far with the CIT committee has been around the fact that the Chromebooks are an affordable replacement to our MacBooks, which are currently at the high school, and a more functional replacement to the iPads, which is at all other buildings, all other grade levels. The Chromebook, as a device itself, is functional at all grade levels. So if we were to move in this direction, it would be a singular device used K to 12. Some of the things that have come up in our discussion, more importantly, has been app functionality and those considerations of having the apps that work on the iPad side work on the Chromebook side. One of the major points of the discussion, if you could actually go to the next slide, please, has been the budget discussion and the cost savings that we would see over the course of a couple of years. My last discussion with the CIT committee, I presented them several options, or several scenarios rather, of what the budget would potentially look like, and I gave it, I presented it over the course of 10 years so that we could see a trend. It's important to know that it would not take 10 years to roll out Chromebooks, but I wanted to show the committee a 10-year trend. And in that trend, we see that we would see a savings of around $200,000 per year, less than what we currently spend on our MacBook leases and iPad leases combined. The other part of the discussion was how we would distribute these devices. And again, these scenarios show different configurations of how and which years we would start the distribution. The first option, and just to give you an example, was to start at the middle school, because that is the first level where our iPad's lease is about to expire. So there have been several scenarios for distribution, as well as an illustration of our cost savings over the years, like I said. One thing to keep in mind is that we have still a legacy lease to pay out, which is the MacBook lease, the one we just signed, which has a further 3 years before that ends. If you could go to the next slide. Another few other considerations discussed with the CIT committee was our rollout plan. And that would involve first piloting the Chromebook with some of our teachers and some of our students to see what the differences and similarities would be. Again, looking at our app compliance between the iPad apps and the Chrome or /Android apps. We would also want to take a look more on the infrastructure side at management and filtering of the devices, things that we still must comply with. Other considerations include professional development for our teaching staff, looking at our support model, and of course our actual rollout and distribution. If you go to the next slide, please. a couple options, and these are just preliminary options that I had wanted to outline for you. What year do we start this? Well, as I began by saying, and as I illustrated initially to the CIT committee, was we would start with the middle school. And so taking that scenario into consideration, if we start with that next year, again, their iPads expire next year in terms of the lease, this is possibly what that would look like. We would have a more aggressive timeline, of course, to consider. We would begin staff professional development as early as next spring. If we move to the next slide, second option would be to do a more gradual rollout. And as you can see there, we would distribute the Chromebooks and the PD at a more gradual pace. And finally, the third option, next slide, would be to hold off next year entirely, spread out the professional development, have a much less aggressive professional development rollout, and distribute the following year. Next slide, please. So our next steps right now, as we still consider if we move forward with Chromebooks, is we are piloting the devices right now. We are beginning to pilot the devices right now. We have a couple within the district that some of our teachers have already agreed to take a look at and test at both the middle school and elementary levels. And I'm also gathering more quotes from other vendors in terms of purchasing and leasing options. So that is where we stand at the moment with this consideration. Any questions?
If I remember right, one of the things you talked about that was in favor of a more aggressive approach is the opportunity for I think I'm right in saying 50% discount on equipment if we move more aggressively.
That's correct.
Which could cost more in total in first year, but would be less on length of contract.
Yeah, that's correct. One of the vendors that I'm working with right now is looking to unload a lot of their stateside inventory, and so they are selling the Chromebooks at half the cost right now for this year only. Next year it'll bump back up to the normal cost. So right now they're offering the Chromebook for $175 at the base cost versus around $225.
What is the preliminary feedback that you've gotten so far from those who are working with the pilot devices?
So far, the first concern was, will the apps work? Will all the apps I use in my room work on the Android device? That has been the only concern, really. One comment that came up was, will it be a touch device? And the one we are considering is a touch device. It's also the type that flips around into a tablet, so there's that tablet option if that's more appropriate at the lower level, let's say.
All right, I'm not familiar with the Chromebooks. Are they, but I know the iPad.
Yeah.
Well, are there generations of Chromebooks, or is it sort of like one Chromebook, we're good from 6 through 12?
To answer your short answer, yes and no. There's one Chromebook that will work in all levels, regardless of what app we're running or what web app we're running. But there are different gens of Chromebooks if we want to do that. I've worked in a district where we actually did purchase different versions of a Chromebook for different grade levels, but by and large, I've found that it really doesn't matter because they're all running the same software, they're all running the same apps. Any different generation of device, you're simply adding or subtracting features of the hardware itself.
So, Jeff, if you could also explain the projected replacement schedule.
Sure. So, as the various spreadsheets that I showed the CIT committee show, is that by the time we get to around year 4 or 5, we get ourselves into a trend where we are replacing K to 5 because their devices don't go home, and we would still have them not go home with them. So these are classroom devices sitting in carts assigned to students. So K to 5 is at a 4-year cycle because that's the typical life cycle of a Chromebook, 4 years. And then 6 through 12 is going to fall into 2 rotations. In other words, we will replace incoming 6th, and then they will keep them for 3 years. And then we replace the incoming 9th graders. So every year, incoming 6th, incoming 9th gets replaced, and then every 4 years, elementary and lower. Okay? It's my recommendation that we continue to lease the K-5 devices, because we know, that's a solid 4-year plan. However, it would be my recommendation that we purchase the 6th and 9th grade devices, because, excuse me, that's going to be a recurring cost year over year, 6th and 9th. And if we get ourselves into a pattern of leasing that every year, that'd be a lot to track.
And just to clarify for the board, even with that plan where we're buying or both leasing and buying new devices on a yearly basis, that's still conservatively, we're looking at a $200,000
Oh yeah,
savings
that includes that 200,000 savings, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Another benefit I remember you saying, I think I'm right here, is that internal staff can do some of the repairs on Chromebook,
Yes.
which we're not able to do on Apple.
Yeah, that's correct. A couple things can happen there. We can get our staff brand trained. In other words, like we went with HP or Lenovo or whatever. Those companies have programs by which the technician gets trained and is qualified to make in-house repairs. So we would, disqualify our warranty less if we can repair the device ourselves. It's also important to understand, too, that with the outgoing 8th graders, okay, before they've received their new device in 9th grade, the outgoing 8th graders would return those devices back to us. So now we're maintaining a loaner inventory and parts inventory. So now I'm spending less on parts and loaners as well, year over year over year.
So mine isn't so much a question, it's just a comment that I think a lot of our stakeholders should know, is that over the years, we as a board have asked multiple times if we could switch, if there would be a cost savings, if, a lot of us felt that, the MacBooks weren't necessarily the greatest device for our high school students to be solely working on, because that's not a device that you find often out in the working world. They're very expensive, so it was hard, if that's all the kids knew, and then they're either, headed off to their job or headed off to college, and they're saying, well, I need a Mac. And the parents are going, yeah, no, you're getting a PC because, I can get you a PC for $350, and the Mac is 3 times that. So we asked multiple times, and multiple times we were told, no, it couldn't be done. We couldn't do the switch. It wouldn't save us any money. So I'm not in a position to throw anybody under a bus or anything, but I just want to voice my disappointment in the fact that we asked, and we asked many times, and each time we were told absolutely not, can't be done. And now we're finding out that that was incorrect information. And I want to thank you, Jeff, for looking into this and for showing us it can be done. And it can be done, and it's going to save us some money, and that's money that can be well spent in other areas. So thank you for bringing this to us and for letting us know that it can, in fact, be done.
I had one last question in regards to what Tina was saying with feedback. Has the union leadership and teachers been brought into the 3 plans as into, would they be okay with the aggressive, training-wise for them? I mean, we're going to a Windows-based, and most people are used to it.
Sure.
But it's still a different change.
Right.
Because if they're for it, I don't think anybody here is going to say no to the aggressive.
We
part.
actually haven't gotten that specific feedback yet. So when we do, I will present that to you. Yeah.
And these will have windows, right? Not,
The Chromebook does not run Windows. No, this
okay,
is,
they don't, okay.
it runs Android and
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
It's
I'm not,
close,
I
yeah.
mean, I'm an HP girl, so.
that's okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
I have one other thing on my report. Community service. Last week, a team of administrators attended Community Day work parties at Saratoga Park in Lower Pottsgrove and the Althouse Arboretum in Upper Pottsgrove. We were joined by a group of middle school National Junior Honor Society students and their faculty advisor, Ms. Deb McElvain. We painted, cleared brush, and removed rotten, heavy wooden railway ties. It was a great experience. I very much enjoyed the working with the team. I want to thank Ms. McElvain. I also want to thank Dr. Gonzalez, our middle school principal, for making the arrangements. And I want to thank our friends at Lower Pottsgrove and Upper Pottsgrove Townships. It was a great time.
We're going to move on to action items 4.1.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve 4.1.
I have a motion and a second to approve 4.1. Do we have any comments or questions?
Just a little explanation on the new position.
Absolutely. So 4.1 is for the creation of, well, actually, it's for the approval of our candidate for the Coordinator of Special Services. At a previous meeting, we had asked for this position to be approved. This is someone to manage our behavioral team. So across all 5 buildings, we have a board-certified behavioral analyst, that's a BCBA, and we have several RBTs, which are registered behavioral technicians. Those staff members, as well as some other support staff, interact and support with students on behavioral interventions. This position is needed to manage those positions, to do the evaluations, and also make sure that our resources are properly aligned to support the students with what they need across the district.
Do we have any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll move on to 4.2.
I'd like to make a motion we approve 4.2.
I have a motion and a second to approve 4.2 professional staff appointments. Do we have any comments or questions?
Yes, an explanation for the community, please.
Absolutely. So this is for our counselor for our Falcon Academy program. The Falcon Academy is a Twilight AEDY program that we run out of the high school. Twilight means that it happens after the students have left for the day. AEDY means Alternative Education for Disruptive Youth. So when students run afoul of our code of conduct and need to be placed, it's good to have a program in-house because we can maintain that relationship and the education supervision of that student. Plus, it's an appropriate, it's a lower cost than placing kids all the time.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We're moving on to 4.3.
I'd like to make a motion we approve 4.3 through 4.6.
A motion and a second to combine 4.3 through 4.6. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll move on to 5.1.
I'd like to make a motion we approve 5.1.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution to waive fees for real estate taxes. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
Again, an explanation for the community.
Yes, thank you. Back in July, Pennsylvania passed Act 57 of 22, which amends the local tax collection law, thereby giving people who don't get their tax bills in certain situations waiver of any additional fees, interest, penalties, and they would get back to the face amount. Essentially, those certain circumstances are anyone who purchases a home and did not get their bill within the first 12 months of ownership, or if it's a mobile home, within the first 12 months of the lease of that mobile home. And the Department of Community and Economic Development will be creating an application for taxpayers to use to give to tax collectors.
Have any comments or questions in regards to this? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. We move on to 5.2.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve 5.2 through 5.4.
I have a motion and a second to combine 5.2 through 5.4. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
I have a quick comment on 5.2. Welcome you to explain it, but I want to thank you for the discernment that your administration has shown consistently, and not just going with this or that, but really discerning what's necessary, what is coming in too high, and we'll pass until something more beneficial for everyone comes together. And again, I applaud you for that. So thank you.
Do I have any other comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. We're going to move on to action item 6.1.
I'd like to make the motion we approve action items education 6.1 through 6.3.
I have a motion and a second to approve 6.1 through 6.3. Do we have any comments or questions in regards to those? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Move on to committee items. 7.1.
I'd like to make a motion 7.1 policy committee meeting minutes as of 9/27/22.
I have a motion and a second to approve the 7.1 policy committee meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion. Anybody against? Motion passes. We're going to move on to the committee reports, operations, please.
The Operations Committee met October 11th, and there were several items of business. First of all, the good news is we're looking at approximately $2 million surplus from several sources. Actually, it's $2 million plus another $1 million due to staff and benefits savings. Mr. Linke gave a brief summary of the savings. They're from a variety of sources. He's recommending moving $3 million over to capital funds sometimes near the end of the year. The other thing is, second item is, we went over the beginnings of the school year budget, and he's recommending that we adopt a resolution to stay below the tax index at an upcoming meeting, either November, December, or January. Excuse me. There was on the downside, easy come, easy go. On the downside there is work being done by Yvette on the roofing replacement. And the roof at West Pottsgrove is approximately 30 years old. The HVAC system is, as we were talking about, like my car. It uses a refrigerant which is rapidly becoming unavailable because of environmental concerns. And so we're going to have to look at a major overhaul of West Pottsgrove roof and potentially HVAC system. The last item that was discussed was the facility assessment, which we already approved. Anyway, that is something that is part of a long-term plan of what we're going to do to maintain. If you recall, Jeff Caldwell prepared a 10-year plan, which I referred to a lot, which had about $50 million of basically repairs and renovations over the next 10 years. That's a lot of money. And so what the facilities assessment plan is to do is to prioritize and give us an idea of what's coming down the pike. Many of us have been here on the board when roofs were discussed both here and at lower and at middle school. And, you know, it just seems that this is a project that indicates how well we're exercising stewardship over the facilities. And I could go on and on about that, but basically, this is something we need to do to exercise good stewardship over our facilities. So that's a brief summary. Thank you.
I did want to clarify a couple of things for the public, because they're going to see, I assume they see the minutes, correct? Minutes are public.
Yes.
Yeah. The public's probably going to notice that we had roughly a $2 million surplus, and that, of course, generates a lot of discussion amongst the public saying, how could you be at $2 million off of your budget and such like that? So I wanted to clarify as into what that $2 million was. It was actually 1.2 million of it was due to, we had a lot of turnover in staff. And when we have turnover in staff, especially administration, especially in teachers retiring, we actually saved $1.2 million going from who we had to that. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, we were so far off, it's $2 million off. So there was 1.2. We also had about $500,000 in savings on the transportation, as some students stayed virtual when we first started last year versus everybody slowly coming back. There was an additional $500,000 because we have to budget the whole year like everybody was here. We had some virtually. And the last was, of course, thankfully we had a lot of students come, back from the charter schools and such like that, saw that our programs were working, so we saved another like few $100,000 from that. So the overall $2 million wasn't a lot of, okay, how did you miss it? It was mainly just areas that were easily explainable. So I wanted to make sure the public was aware of that.
Yeah, thank you, Al. 2 points, and I probably was too brief in going over the cause of the surplus. You can summarize it in two things. Number one, there was a savings when we had the turnover and people came in at a lower salary, as Al mentioned. And the other factor was transportation costs and virtual costs were essentially a bump associated with the COVID crisis and restarting. You don't know at the outset. I didn't know this. I'm not that involved with the budget, but one of the things you notice is that when you shut down the school and restart it, there's going to be a disruption, and there's either going to be a surplus, which we were luckily had, or a huge deficit. And you flip a coin because you don't know what's going to happen when you shut down essentially the entire country for 6 months and a year. So, I tend to gloss over, and I probably didn't spend enough time talking about that. And thank you for that correction. But it was something that I was expecting to see a big number up or down, and fortunately for us, it's a big number. It's a big number surplus, but it's essentially going to be an in-out item because we're looking at renovations to the roof at West Pottsgrove, which is going to be about the same. About the same as the number we're looking at here. We're just waiting for the final returns to come in. So thank you for that correction.
And the other thing I did want to clarify for the public was you're going to start seeing numbers that you're going to blow your mind when it comes to the tax increase. Right? They're going to come in with the Act 1 index at 4.1%, and because some God forbid rule, we're allowed to actually raise it higher than that because we're a poorer district. It makes no sense to me that we would actually raise it more when our district has less money to spend. So they can actually go up to a 5.4, which you'll probably see in the media and such saying how could be up to 5.4. We are never going to be anywhere near that number. So I wanted to make sure everybody is aware of that publicly, that we're going to obviously pass a resolution to not go above that number, but we're never going to get near that number. So I don't want anybody getting worried about that, of course, when that comes out in the next couple of months. Thank you.
Yeah, just one last thing. That $2 million is going to, when we transfer it to the, I want to say general fund because I'm, capital fund, because I'm thinking in terms of another budget. But that $2 million is part of a cushion that we're going to need when these facilities report comes in for what the costs are down the road. Because, as I've already said on several occasions, deferred maintenance is a high-interest loan. You can't defer you can postpone it, but you can't defer it forever. And when that cost comes, the cost is going to rise exponentially. And there are numerous industries that have tried to defer maintenance and had to pay the penalty for it. And, so anyway, I don't want to get too far down that road because hopefully we can avoid the serious problems.
Thank you, Dr. Nipper. Is there any other questions or comments that anybody has for operations and facilities? All right, hearing none, we're going to move over to the report for curriculum.
Mr. Voorhees was kind enough to offer the report. I want to again apologize. I was unable to attend that meeting due to a family obligation, and I want to thank everybody who sat in and worked so hard on the meeting. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Our committee met on the evening of October 18th. We had 3 items on our agenda, one of which Mr. Bittler already accomplished beautifully regarding the Chromebooks. The other 2 topics we discussed were, one was intervention data, what we call our intervention data, which is really a process that we go through at the district level to collect and analyze data and most importantly make intentional instructional decisions based upon that data. So to do that, our students are engaged in what we call benchmark assessments, during which students take the same assessment in the fall and then the winter and then again in the spring. And these assessments are nationally normed with predetermined cut scores. So what that means is we can monitor if students are in fact reaching a level of proficiency. We can also monitor how much growth they make from one assessment to the next. And I guess even more important is we can make intentional decisions about what we're going to do if they're not meeting that level of proficiency, as well as what we're going to do if they are meeting or exceeding that level of proficiency. In the event that they're not meeting that level of proficiency, interventions are then put into place. And because of the work that we're doing to tie this directly with our data dashboard with Ed Insight, we can monitor those interventions that are in place and determine the effectiveness of it, because we don't want to keep doing one intervention if, in fact, we're not getting the results that we want from that. So there was some conversation about how is this different than perhaps some of the things that we've been doing in the past. Dr. Lucas and the principals and myself have been working very hard to bring greater consistency among the buildings in terms of what that process and practice looks like. We've revised some of our assessments. We think long and hard about the assessments that we're putting into place, how long it takes to gather information about students, and how quickly we can use that information to make those decisions. And then just being very strategic again in terms of those instructional decisions that we make. The other item of business that we talked about was our after-school tutoring program. This actually we've had it in place for some time. It became a larger thing because of the American Rescue Plan and funding that's actually allocated, must be allocated in terms of some of that ESSER funding that we have for after-school tutoring programs. So we had a much larger program in place last year. What I shared at the committee is, and I guess you might expect this, as the age of the student goes up, the attendance of after-school tutoring kind of goes down a little bit. So based upon some of that, we made some revisions in terms of how that money is spent. Some of that was being allocated for interventions that are occurring within the school day when students are at their freshest. That being said, we also know that there is a population of students for which we want to offer an after-school tutoring program. So again, jumping back to that intervention data, an appropriate intervention for some students might be some additional learning time after school, working with our staff members. So this is entirely funded through the American Rescue Plan, and if you recall, that money is offered to us through September 30th of 2024, okay? This programming will begin in November, will run till approximately April, and then informations will be shared with families in the next 2 weeks, inviting families and or students to participate in that as needed. Any committee members who were there, any part of that conversation that I missed that you wanted to jump in on? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody have any comments or questions?
I do have one comment that I'd just like to make. You may have seen the news, page one headline today where they were talking in newspapers across the state. They were talking about the drop in scores. The drop in scores, they were specifically looking at New Jersey and Pennsylvania. There were significant drops in student achievement scores over the last couple of years due to COVID. We have these resources for a short time. We have these resources through, basically through this school year and next. We want to use these resources to close those learning gaps. One of the things that has shown a lot of promise is high-intensity tutoring, after-school tutoring. We have money, we have people that are willing to be there and support that learning. We really need the kids to show up. So when we send out these invitations, I urge everyone to respond to that and to participate in the practice, because we have this we're not going to have this money to run programs like this all the time. Let's take advantage of it while we have it. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to new business. Dr. Finnerty.
That was my new business.
Tina. Nothing from me, thanks. Patty.
Just briefly, I just wanted to thank the middle school PTO. I was able to attend with my granddaughter. They had a Halloween bash last Friday. So the music was loud, there was all kinds of food for the kids, but it was really nice to see the kids finally getting out and just being kids. The music was a little loud for me, but they were dancing, and the one thing that really caught me is the second prize winner, because they had different contests on the costumes, was a toilet bowl. This kid won a second place for a toilet bowl. It just was really a lot of fun. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the middle school PTO.
Jay.
Nothing from me, thanks.
Joe.
I have nothing, but I would like to just thank the people that volunteered at Lower Pottsgrove and Upper Pottsgrove, all the administration, kids, and so forth that went out and volunteered to clean up the band shell down there in Lower, and up there at Sprogel's Run, I guess it was, up in Upper Pottsgrove. So thank you all that went out there. I know a lot of times the football team, everybody gets involved, so thank you all.
Coming around, Dr. Nippert. Jim. Bill. Nothing. Ashley.
Just something really quick. I know at the last meeting I mentioned that the MCIU was having a building dedication, and I did attend that last Friday. It was at their location on Main Street in Norristown. The building has been there a long time. I was unaware that it was in really bad shape for a long time. And they wanted to dedicate it like 2 years ago, but then COVID hit and they had a harder time getting everything taken care of. The building is beautiful. They house just about, I mean, they've got preschool there, they've got the partial hospitalization program and other programs upstairs in the very secure area. The dedication ceremony was just really nice. There were a lot of local politicians, state representatives there. Val Arkush was there. Joe Cerisi was there. So it was just nice to hear a couple of the stories about how the MCIU has helped some kids throughout the years, and it helped a lot of kids. And then I did, with a small group of people, I did a quick tour of the building for some of the areas that we could see. We couldn't see the super secure areas upstairs, but we did go into a couple of the pre-K counts rooms, and a couple of the areas where they help with, like, rooms where they help with reading and have separate areas cordoned off so that the kids have privacy. And we saw some of the little ones, and they were just adorable, and it was just a really nice nice afternoon. And I do need to find out who does their catering, because man, that dessert was really good.
All right. I never asked you, Brian. You ever want anything?
No, I don't have anything.
I do have one thing. Monday is Halloween. And Halloween is one of my favorite holidays. And obviously, this one's a little bit different. So we have, obviously, the Phillies in the World Series. And they're on the same night. Congratulations, Phillies. Yes, yes, yes. But please, remember the kids are outside trick-or-treating. I know people are going to be rushing to get home to see the baseball game. Let's make sure the kids get home, too. We do not want to come in on a Tuesday hearing, God forbid, some tragedy happen because someone was rushing to get home to see the baseball game and they hit a little kid going through the street. So please make sure the little kids get home safe and sound. All right, and that's all from me. Remember, everybody, I need you to stay for like 10, 15 minutes just to go over some executive session. Do we have anything else? If not, I need a motion for adjournment. Oh, yes, wait. We do a public comment. Do we have any public comment online? Now I need a motion for adjournment. Everybody in favor? So motion passes. All right, see you guys in November.